Hey guys! Today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. Obsession with another person can sometimes resemble something out of a horror movie, when hidden desires, dangerous fixations, and an overwhelming need for control override reason and morality. And when the object of that obsession rejects the advances or tries to cut off all contact, it can become the very trigger that leads to tragedy. This case shook the entire country in 2012 and set a precedent for revising certain aspects of criminal law. A young college student expecting a child became the victim of a brutal crime committed by a man who had been stalking and harassing her for years. When he failed to gain her affection, he made a devastating decision, taking her life and committing an unspeakable act. He did not attempt to deny his actions. On the contrary, he described every detail of what he had done to the young woman, who was 6 months pregnant at the time. But despite his full confession, flaws in the legal system meant that he still had a chance to escape the harshest possible punishment. Alicia Kimberly Bromfield was born on August 28, 1990, in Joliet, Illinois. She was the eldest of 5 siblings in the large and close-knit family of Cheryl and James Bromfield. Growing up with 2 younger sisters and 2 brothers, Alicia was always a caring and responsible older sibling who helped look after them. In school, Alicia quickly distinguished herself as one of the top students. Her teachers noted her sharp intellect, strong determination, and natural ability to excel academically. She was also incredibly social and kind-hearted, known for her ability to uplift those around her. She had a talent for listening, offering support, and making people laugh, which naturally drew others to her. Because of this, she was always surrounded by friends and could easily connect with people from all walks of life. By the time she reached high school, Alicia had already set her sights on a career in law. Determined to achieve this goal, she started saving money for tuition at a well-respected university. Her family lived modestly, and with her parents still raising her younger siblings, she knew she had to contribute to her own education. At just 16, she took a job as a florist at a garden center, where she arranged bouquets, designed displays, and worked on various special orders. Alicia's creative nature made her fall in love with the job. The flexible schedule allowed her to balance work with school, first at her high school, then at a Catholic academy, and later at Western Illinois University, where she was accepted into the criminal justice and forensic psychology program. Over the years, Alicia became one of the top florists at the garden center. She frequently handled high-profile orders, trained new employees, and earned the trust of management. Her hard work paid off. She was making enough to cover her tuition and rent. Life was going according to plan, and she was just over a year away from completing her degree. But during the second semester of her junior year, everything suddenly changed. During her 3rd year of college, Alicia met a young man named Michael. He was also a student at the university, majoring in economics. The two began dating, and after about 6 months together, Alicia learned in the spring of 2012 that she was expecting a child. This wasn't something she had planned, but instead of feeling overwhelmed or uncertain, she embraced the news with joy. When Alicia told her boyfriend about the pregnancy, his reaction was far from supportive. Michael made it clear that he wasn't ready for such a responsibility. He flat out refused to marry her and insisted that she end the pregnancy as soon as possible. But Alicia had already made up her mind. She was determined to keep the baby. When she stood her ground, Michael cut ties with her completely, refusing to offer any help or acknowledge the child. Alicia knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but her parents supported her decision and assured her they would help in any way they could. She continued working, saving money little by little, and purchasing essentials for her future daughter. She truly believed she could handle the challenges ahead and was certain she would find happiness despite everything. In the summer of 2012, during a routine ultrasound, Alicia learned she was expecting a girl. Overjoyed, she chose a name for her daughter, Ava Lucia, and eagerly awaited her arrival. She had already bought a crib, stroller, bottles, baby clothes, and toys, all in preparation for her due date in early December. Even though she was well into her pregnancy, Alicia planned to continue working and studying until the very end. Because her job was seasonal, she knew she would have paid time off in the winter, which would allow her to adjust to life as a single mother, while also preparing for her final semester in graduation. Despite the difficulties ahead, she remained optimistic, full of hope for the future, and surrounded by the love and support of her family. But tragically, her dreams were never realized. As mentioned earlier, Alicia had started working as a florist at just 16 years old. Around 6 months before she was hired, a man named Brian Cooper had taken over as the regional manager of the garden center. At the time, he was 31 years old. From the moment Alicia joined the team, Brian took a noticeable interest in her. However, since she was still in high school, he initially kept his distance and maintained a professional demeanor. Over time, Brian gained Alicia's trust and developed a close friendship with her. He often asked her to walk his dog, and even gave her a spare key to his apartment as a sign of how much he trusted her. He paid her extra for these favors, and for Alicia, it was an easy way to make additional income while staying in good standing with her boss. Plus, she had always loved animals and quickly grew attached to Brian's Labrador. At first, Brian seemed kind, friendly, and respectful, and Alicia held him in high regard. But as time passed, his behavior became increasingly intrusive and persistent. He started making direct comments about her appearance, complimenting her in ways that went beyond what was appropriate in a professional setting. To new employees, he would even introduce Alicia as his girlfriend. When confronted about it, he would laugh it off as a joke, but before long it became clear that he wasn't joking at all. Cooper began openly flirting with Bromfield, asking her out on dates and suggesting they start a relationship. Alicia was taken aback. She had always seen her boss, who was 15 years older than her, as practically middle-aged. She felt no romantic interest in him and could only offer friendship. She immediately turned him down, but due to her kind and reserved nature, she struggled to be firm about it. Cooper, however, misinterpreted her politeness as playful teasing, convincing himself that she was simply playing hard to get. He started finding excuses to call Alicia into the stockroom under the pretense of work-related matters. But once they were alone, he would make unwanted advances and try to kiss her. She didn't have the confidence to push back forcefully, so instead, she did her best to avoid him altogether, making sure never to be alone with him. However, this only made things worse. His friendly facade quickly turned into something much darker. Cooper became increasingly hostile, nitpicking her work for the smallest mistakes and growing visibly jealous whenever she interacted with male coworkers. He even started interfering with her lunch breaks, refusing to let her leave if she was planning to eat with someone else. He manipulated her schedule to ensure he was always present when she was working, keeping constant watch over her every move. His control extended beyond the workplace. Cooper frequently assigned Alicia to work-related trips to other cities and states, always insisting that he accompany her. These trips were just another excuse to force her into spending time with him and another opportunity for him to ask her out. When Alicia started dating Michael, Cooper's behavior escalated dramatically. It was as if he had completely lost control. He buried her in extra tasks, and if she refused to take on certain projects or declined to travel for work, he would lash out, insulting her, berating her in front of customers, and threatening to fire her. He seemed to take pleasure in humiliating her, pushing her to tears with his outbursts. Alicia seriously considered quitting and finding another job. But when she discovered she was expecting, and especially after Michael walked away from the relationship, her situation changed drastically. Now she was terrified of losing her job, her only source of income. Searching for a new position while preparing to welcome her daughter was not a risk she could afford to take. When Cooper learned that Alicia was expecting and preparing to raise her daughter alone, he shocked her with an unexpected proposal. He offered to marry her and even give his last name to her child. But Alicia rejected him once again. Not only did she have no romantic feelings for him, but by this point she had also grown afraid of him. She no longer knew what he was capable of. She tried to stay quiet and compliant, avoiding any potential conflicts. She kept her head down and attempted to make herself as invisible as possible, but Cooper's fixation only deepened. It was as if he was determined to break her, both mentally and physically, if she refused to be with him. He deliberately made her life miserable, retaliating in every way possible. For instance, If Alicia had scheduled time off for a doctor's appointment, Cooper would suddenly change her shifts, forcing her to rearrange her plans constantly. It was clear, if she wouldn't be with him, he would do everything in his power to make her suffer. Alicia was on the verge of a breakdown and seriously considered quitting her job. However, she knew that doing so would likely mean putting her education on hold. On top of that, the financial burden of supporting herself and her daughter would fall entirely on her parents, something she wanted to avoid. With just over 3 months left until her daughter's arrival and the start of her paid winter leave, Alicia made up her mind. She would endure Cooper's behavior for a little longer, take her legally protected maternity leave, and then, once her daughter was a bit older, find a job in her field. She didn't want to worry her parents unnecessarily, so they only knew bits and pieces about the difficulties she was facing at work. Alicia occasionally vented to her mother about her boss, but never went into much detail. Cheryl had no idea just how much her eldest daughter was dealing with on a daily basis. In August 2012, Brian Cooper started pressuring Alicia to accompany him to another state for his sister's wedding. She refused at first, but this time, he used a different approach. He played on her sympathy. Cooper told her how much his sister meant to him and explained that he had to walk her down the aisle because their father had recently passed away. Once again, he put on a friendly, non-threatening act, emphasizing how important the event was to him and asking Alicia for just one last favor. He promised that after this, he would stop bothering her. He insisted that he simply didn't want to attend the wedding alone and assured her that she would only be introduced as a close friend and colleague. Cooper even swore that they would be staying at the same hotel as the other guests, in separate rooms. Alicia believed him and eventually agreed. The wedding was scheduled for August 18th and was set to take place in Plainfield, Wisconsin, a drive of several hours. When Alicia told her mother about the trip, Cheryl was immediately alarmed. She knew her daughter's relationship with Cooper had been difficult, and something about this situation felt off. She tried to talk Alicia out of going, but her daughter was a deeply honest and responsible person. Having already given her word, Alicia didn't want to back out. Still, she reassured her mother that she would keep her updated throughout the trip. Early in the morning on August 18th, Cooper picked Alicia up in his car, and they began their drive. At first, everything seemed fine. They talked casually, and he acted polite and composed. But by midday, Alicia called her mother in distress. She wanted to return home immediately. She had been deceived once again. She had just discovered that Cooper had booked them a hotel in a secluded resort area, separate from the rest of the wedding guests. Worse, despite his earlier promises, he had only reserved a single room for both of them. After a heated argument, Cooper managed to calm Alicia down and convince her to stay. Once again, he played on her sympathy and guilt, urging her not to ruin such an important day for his sister. He insisted that the only reason they weren't staying at the main hotel with the other guests was that it was fully booked. As for booking a suite with 2 beds instead of separate rooms, he claimed that there were no single rooms available and that getting 2 suites would have been too expensive. Alicia fell for his manipulation once again, but this time she set firm boundaries. She made it clear that she would be sleeping in the bed while Brian would take the couch. She also told him that once they returned home, they would no longer have any kind of personal relationship, not even a friendship. From that point forward, their interactions would be strictly professional. Cooper agreed, and it seemed like the conflict was resolved. The wedding itself went smoothly. Cooper walked his sister down the aisle, and although he and Alicia sat at the same table during the reception, they barely spoke. He appeared withdrawn and drank heavily, but remained quiet and kept to himself. When the night ended, he drove Alicia back to the small resort hotel where they were staying. On the morning of August 19th, around 9 a.m., a man walked into a supermarket attached to a roadside gas station. His clothes were soaking wet, and he approached an employee, asking to use the phone to call emergency services. In a calm voice, the man told the dispatcher that he had taken the life of his pregnant coworker in a hotel room. When asked if it was an accident, he responded just as casually, saying that he had done it intentionally. After a brief pause, he added, almost as an afterthought, that he was actually a good person. After making the call, He simply sat at a table in the store and waited in silence for law enforcement to arrive. He didn't resist, willingly held out his hands for the officers to place him in handcuffs, and quietly rode with them to the station to give his statement. Meanwhile, another team of officers was dispatched to the hotel room Cooper had mentioned. Upon entering, they found a body lying on the floor, carefully covered with a blanket. A pillow had been placed beneath her head, as if she had been tucked in for sleep, but she was unresponsive, her body already cold and still. The victim was completely unclothed, with a few small bruises and defensive wounds on her body, clear signs that she had fought desperately for her life. The medical examiner later determined the cause of death to be mechanical asphyxiation. Marks on her neck indicated that she had been strangled both manually and with a thin cord. Further forensic analysis revealed evidence of an assault, with biological material found on and inside the body. The hotel room itself was nearly spotless. It appeared that the attack had been sudden, likely occurring while the victim was asleep or completely off guard. The struggle was brief, giving her no chance to cry out for help. No one in the neighboring rooms reported hearing anything unusual. From the moment he was taken into custody, Brian did not try to hide what he had done. In fact, he willingly provided the police with a full account of the crime. He repeatedly insisted that apart from this one act, he was a good person, downplaying the severity of what had happened. When asked why he did it, he simply shrugged and calmly stated that he wanted to see her without clothes. According to Cooper, he and Alicia had a heated argument on the night of his sister's wedding. She had hurt his pride by making it clear that once they returned home, they would no longer even be friends. That rejection consumed him throughout the evening. He drank heavily and avoided her, trying to keep his emotions in check, but secretly thinking about how to retaliate for the pain she had caused him. During his interrogation, Cooper fabricated a story, claiming that he and Alicia had been in a romantic relationship and that they had shared many happy moments together. He falsely accused her of being unfaithful, saying she had become involved with someone else and was now expecting a child from a brief affair. According to him, he had still been willing to forgive her, and even raise the baby as his own, but Alicia had supposedly mocked him and tried to humiliate him. He insisted that she had only agreed to attend the wedding to hurt him further. After the reception, they took a taxi back to the hotel, as Cooper had been drinking too much to drive. As soon as they arrived, Alicia went straight to the shower and then to bed, eager for the night to be over so she could return home in the morning. Meanwhile, Cooper continued drinking at the hotel bar on the ground floor. When he finally returned to the room, Alicia was already asleep. He stepped out onto the balcony, lost in thought, contemplating his next move. Inside him, anger and resentment boiled over, an overwhelming desire to make her suffer as he believed she had made him suffer. He finished the bottle of alcohol he had brought from the bar, then stepped back inside and stood over Alicia as she slept. At that moment, as if sensing something was wrong, she suddenly opened her eyes. Seeing her boss standing over her in the dimly lit room, she quickly sat up and asked what was going on. In a disturbingly calm manner, Brian suggested that once they got back home, they should go out together. Alicia, still groggy from sleep, immediately refused. That single word, no, was the breaking point. Without warning, he lunged at her, wrapping his hands around her throat. She fought back as best as she could, but she couldn't scream for help. A brief struggle unfolded on the bed before Alicia lost consciousness. While Bromfield was unconscious, Cooper removed her clothing and began touching her inappropriately. After a few minutes, Alicia regained consciousness and fought back once again, even managing to bite his hand. The struggle moved to the floor, where Cooper grabbed a phone charger that had been within reach and used it to strangle her until she stopped moving. Afterward, in a disturbing display of cruelty, he committed an act of intimate aggression against her unresponsive body. Once it was over, Cooper sat next to her for some time, seemingly lost in thought. Eventually, he covered her with a blanket, placed a pillow under her head, and began contemplating his next move. When questioned about these actions, he claimed that Alicia wouldn't have wanted to be found that way, which is why he covered her. However, when asked why he had placed a pillow beneath her head, he had no answer. Not wanting to face the consequences of what he had done, Cooper decided to take his own life. He attempted to inflict wounds on himself, hoping to lose consciousness from blood loss, but found the pain unbearable. As a result, the injuries were shallow and ultimately non-life-threatening. In the morning, he left the hotel and walked toward a nearby bay, intending to drown himself. He waded into the water up to his neck and stood there for several minutes before changing his mind. Instead, he swam back to shore, walked along the road, and eventually spotted a gas station. That's when he decided to call emergency services and confess to everything. When Cooper was asked if he had ever done anything like this before, he insisted that he had never taken a life or caused serious physical harm. However, he admitted to struggling with controlling his emotions, especially his anger. A background check confirmed that he had no prior criminal record, but there had been multiple incidents where he displayed threatening behavior that went unpunished. Investigators soon discovered that before Alicia started working at the garden center, another young woman had been employed there and had faced similar harassment from Cooper. She had reported his behavior to upper management, but when her complaints were ignored, she chose to quit rather than endure his treatment any longer. Detectives also interviewed Cooper's former girlfriend, Melissa, who described him as a deeply dangerous individual. She recounted his explosive temper, manipulative tendencies, and his obsession with control. According to her, Cooper was physically aggressive on multiple occasions, and at one point, he even restrained her to prevent her from leaving his house. Terrified, Melissa never reported Brian to the police. After their breakup, she moved back to her parents' home in another city, hoping to never cross paths with him again. Similarly, the former garden center employee who had been harassed by Cooper also chose not to press charges, though for a different reason. Since he had not physically harmed her, she simply left her job, believing that was the safest way to deal with the situation. Alicia, however, had repeatedly reported Cooper's harassment and abuse of power throughout her years working at the garden center. Yet, her complaints were ignored. As a regional manager, Cooper was highly valued by upper management. He met performance goals, was seen as responsible, and got the job done. Not only was Brian never fired, but he wasn't even temporarily removed from his position. When Alicia warned that if nothing was done, she would have no choice but to involve the authorities, the company's response was to grant Cooper a few weeks of paid leave and recommend he take anger management classes, without ever checking to see if he actually did. During the investigation, more disturbing evidence came to light, proving that Cooper had been fixated on Alicia for years. Authorities discovered recordings on his computer taken from a hidden camera he had secretly placed in his bathroom. He had filmed Alicia while she used his restroom after walking his dog. Investigators also found that he had installed similar cameras in hotel rooms during work trips, where he had forced her to accompany him. Despite his initial confession, Cooper later changed his plea, claiming he wasn't guilty due to intoxication. He admitted to being deeply obsessed with Alicia, but insisted that he never would have harmed her had he been sober that night. His defense attorneys attempted to use extreme intoxication as a mitigating factor, arguing that his actions were not premeditated but rather the result of impaired judgment. However, the prosecution exposed inconsistencies in this claim. The district attorney pointed out that Cooper had been able to recall every detail of the night in question, describing his actions and even his thought process, hardly the behavior of someone acting in an unconscious or impulsive state. As shocking as it may seem, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict regarding the extent of Cooper's culpability. 2 jurors believed that his intoxication should be considered a mitigating factor. This meant that Alicia's family had to endure the agony of a retrial. While awaiting the second trial, Cheryl Bromfield became an activist, fighting to change state laws regarding voluntary intoxication as a legal defense. She drafted petitions and sent letters to lawmakers, urging them to close the legal loophole that allowed intoxication to lessen criminal responsibility. Her efforts paid off. By April 2014, the state governor signed amendments into law, ensuring that voluntary intoxication could no longer be used as a defense in such cases. The retrial took place in May 2014, and this time, the verdict was definitive. Brian Cooper was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms, without the possibility of parole for the premeditated crime against Alicia and her unborn daughter, as well as the desecration of her remains. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.